This is a story about men and mining in an incredibly mountainous, rough section of British Columbia. The northwest corner of the province up against the Alaska Panhandle. The wealth of ages was locked in these mountaintops. At the turn of the century, men came here to find it. The story can best be told by the mayor of Stewart BC, Ian McLeod, for 10 years, a true servant of his public. Ian, Stewart, British Columbia, it's past and it's present. What is it today?
Today it's a pretty happy, well-equipped town, first-class recreational facilities, first-class educational facilities, and thanks in the main to the new policies where mining taxations to a large degree stay locally rather than joining that great pipeline to Ottawa and Victoria insofar as tax dollars have been in the past.
What is your population now?
1,500.
It was an incredible breed of man that came in here at the turn of the century. What was it that they actually accomplished?
From the start, it was the prospector looking for an easy route into the Klondike that started the early development in the Stewart area. In the 1910 era, the railroad dreamers came in, started a railroad to the Peace River, they thought. It didn't get very far. But these were the people who started building our nation.
The years of the Dunwell Mine.
Discovered in the early 20s, into production about 1927, closed 1930.
How far would the shafts go?
Oh, there are 4 or 5 miles of horizontal and vertical workings starting right at this entrance here. The first load of ore that was hauled on teams down through the main street of Stewart was a great occasion, assisted undoubtedly by the promoters of the mine, and they hired an old Scotchman to accompany the teams with his bagpipes. And as they marched down the main street, the townspeople, of course, were watching the big occasion, but there was the odd Scotchman on the sides really laughing as the procession went through, because they knew that the old piper had chosen the tune, The Barren Rocks of Eden, to accompany the first shipment of ore.
Dunwell added considerably to the economy of Stewart, Ian?
Oh, it certainly did, Bob. It was one of the closest and one of the earliest producers in the area.
How did the mine actually work? What were the workings over here?
Well, this was a typical aerial tramline situation where the ore went down to the valley floor, suspended in the air on cables.
Much of a drop from here to the valley?
Not in this particular case, a substantial drop, perhaps 1,000 feet.
How did they get all the equipment up here?
Well, it all came up the hard way with horses and men.
Hmm. And for the men themselves, they would have stayed up here, would they?
Yes, their bunkhouses are still standing just over the ridge up here.
Up above. How many men were in here?
There were 100 men employed here in the heyday.
Living up the hill?
Living up the hill in these bunkhouses.
Now, what happens to men like that when all of a sudden the mine...
Well, they go on to other mines throughout the country. A miner is basically a transient type of person. And in fact, I think they enjoy seeing the country by working at various mines throughout the entire Canadian West.
So very likely there would have been a few shacks in the area of Stewart that had Dunwell stock ended up on their walls. Eh?
Well, I'm sure that they might have been able to wallpaper a few walls.
Let's consider the actual mechanical achievement here. How big a thing was it?
Well, for its day, it was a remarkable achievement. I think one of the things we can't help but observe is how they utilized gravity to get the ore to the bottom of the hill, how they utilized water power to give them their energy requirements. So perhaps there's even a little lesson to us today in utilizing some of these old-time methods in our day of energy shortages.
But when they packed up in 1930, they left it all behind.
They left it all behind, and the weather has been the main enemy of what has happened to the structures.
Could you still drill rock with that?
Well, it's a little dull, Bob, but there's probably the odd old-timer around that would know how to use it. From up above, Bob, the cable would stretch about 8,000 feet, and there would be 4 of them, 2 to take the ore coming downhill and 2 to pull the empty cars or the cars loaded with supplies uphill. Over a vertical dimension of 1,000 feet and probably 8,000 feet long.
While they were operating, they were doing very well. What were all of the buildings here doing?
Well, it was a complete mining camp, and even today I think you need the same thing, assay office, stores, as well as the mill facility, the power plants, and compressor house. It was quite a bustling little community.
When you think about the construction that went on, you have got to think about some very, very fine carpenters that were working up in these places.
Yes, it's certainly apparent, the fine workmanship and all hand tools. There were no power tools, of course. It's funny that there were expensive things like gold scales laying around, wide open, unlocked, year after year, and the type of people that lived here would not bother anything that was not their own. Eventually, as the outsiders came in and there was more access, things started to walk away, and they're walking away at a faster rate every day.
What in the world would that have been used for?
Well, they both came out of the assay office, and this little piece is a piece of slag that was left over after the mineral had been ground and treated with flux and subjected to a very high temperature in the assay furnace, at which time the metals would have settled to the bottom of the cup and the slag would float on the top.
But was this part of the recovery process to see what you were getting?
Part of the testing process to see what you could recover out of the ore.
Can you use them for drinking vessels today?
I think it's pretty safe to put a little rum in them.
Okay. Porter, Idaho mine?
And Prosperity. Twin mines. Work together. The original discovery was by Clay Porter down the hill, and he was from Idaho, so he named it Porter, Idaho. The second and richer discovery was here on the Prosperity, done by a Norwegian named Eli Watland.
What years are we talking about, Ian?
We're talking in the mid-20s. This construction started around 1927. The operation only lasted a couple of years, due in main to the 1929 crash, which knocked the price of silver down to a level that it soon became not economic to mine. During the 2 or 3 years they were in production, the value of the silver was $3.5 million. Today, at today's prices, that would have a value of $40 million.
And would be well worth trying to put the buildings in.
Well, I would think so. I'm told that the premier company who did this construction, in fact, did get the return of the capital investment.
But surely, if you think of it in terms of those early days, at this elevation has got to be an engineering marvel.
It's got to be a marvel of human endurance when we realize the fact that this was done entirely by men and horses at the start, that the original cables that got to this level were taken up by horses. The trails were built by men with hand tools, and then the light cables were rolled down the hill in order that they could pull these much heavier cables up, and that was the start of it.
And then the ore cars, the ore was carried off the mountain top.
Yes.
Down below.
Yes.
And what happened below?
Well, below, the ore was so rich it was shipped raw to the smelter either at Anyox or Tacoma. It did not need concentration as most ores do.
How many people were?
100 men would have been the maximum in the two bunkhouses. There was a twin to this one behind us, 2,000 feet down the hill. It was wiped out by a snowslide in 1966. Same winter that the 26 men were killed at Grand Duke. Now that building had stood there safely since 1927 until 1966.
What is the elevation here?
6,000 feet, over a mile high.
And because of the elevation, all the wood is perfectly sound?
Yes, there is very little deterioration due to rot because of the very low temperatures, and therefore oxidation does not take place.
And for sure, there's very little two-footed deterioration.
There's none at all. The only little bit of salvage must have happened by helicopter, because I'm sure you'll agree nobody would pack anything out. Nobody would even walk this far, let alone start to pack any souvenirs out.
Not today. The people that lived here, were the families in here also?
Oh, none whatsoever. Single man accommodation only.
No women?
No women at all.
And in those days, the women weren't in the mining camps, eh?
No, they weren't, and especially in this one, they weren't, because it's in such an inaccessible area.
What was it like in those days in the mining camps? Not that you're that old, but what do you know about it?
Well, I think the men were pretty dedicated to have to work in an area such as this. The winter times were extremely bad here, comparable to the Arctic, where the men, when they came from the bunkhouse to their working places, had to use lifelines at all times because a sudden blizzard could come in and they'd be lost in that couple of 100 yards from the bunkhouse to the place of work.
The ore buckets are still hanging in the tram line.
Yes.
Did men ever ride them?
Oh, yes, extensively. The men preferred to ride in them rather than walk that tough 7 miles.
What's the drop off one of those buckets at its steepest point?
Oh, it's a good 1,500 feet straight down.
My God. Did they ever have an accident? Do you know?
No, and I don't think they carried parachutes either.
If we're to talk about Premier Silback, we've got to go back just ahead of the 1920s in a piece of rock.
Exactly. That was the evidence the old prospector found that there was a rich ore body in the vicinity.
What did he see in this?
Well, he saw some very rich silver and gold content, especially the polybasite, which has an extremely high silver content.
What did he do? Because this was just simply on a loose slope of rock, eh?
He was very frustrated because of the overburden that was over the entire area. He could not find the bare rocks. And as a last resort, he drove a tunnel blindly in the direction that he thought the ore might lay.
On this level, where we're standing?
On this level, yes. This is a discovery level.
Then what happened?
Then after the first two having gone broke, the third man, O.B. Bush, came in and within 12 feet was into one of the richer Bonanza ore bodies ever discovered in Canada.
This then became a very, very rich mine.
A very rich mine that produced $130 million worth of metal, that paid $23 million in dividends. And what we're seeing here is a salvage operation where it is still producing some wealth. This is classed as high grading in that the ore is shipped raw to the smelter without processing. The main rich ore, of course, is gone and was mined downwards 1,000 lateral and vertical shafts, and with 50 miles of workings below us from here on down.
For 1,000 feet in elevation?
Yes.
Now, you worked this mine as a young man. What was it like?
Well, it was a safe, pleasant place to work. The pay wasn't so great compared to today's standards. But $5 a day was a bit of money to us young fellows who did want to work and learn a trade.
What did they pay the horses a day?
Exactly the same. There was no discrimination.
Anyox, British Columbia. There isn't anything here now, Ian, except ruins.
No, there isn't, but at one time there were an awful lot of people and a lot of industry going on in this area, and it was certainly very important to not only northwestern British Columbia, but to the province as a whole from an economic and social point of view.
This was considered to be one of the really huge smelters in the world, wasn't it?
At one time it was the largest in the British Empire and exported untold thousands of tons of blister copper throughout the world.
And the deep sea ships came here to pick up the product.
Yes, they did. And the smelter behind us belched great quantities of sulfurous smoke that killed the vegetation in the entire area. And only now, as you can see, is it starting to grow back.
What happened when it shut down?
The miners were distributed, I suppose, throughout Canada. Some came to Stewart. Here we see a good illustration of a $30 million capital investment that was gambled upon and lost. And although there are possibilities that these houses and this facility will be utilized again, it should serve as an example to the people who write the legislation concerning mining that for every winner there are an awful lot of losers, and here's one right here.
Now, this is Kitsault, located on Alice Arm off the Portland Canal, a very remote area, and yet the housing looks as if it might be downtown Vancouver or Winnipeg or Halifax.
Yes, it's a very good class of housing and certainly has not had much use. As you see now, Bob, the houses are all vacant, although they're kept up in quite good shape.
What's the history of the mine, and what kind of a property is it?
It's a molybdenum property that went into production in 1968 or 69, operated for 5 or 6 years, found they couldn't make a profit and were forced to close.
Who were the investors? Were they little people in the cities of Canada?
No, they were large multinational corporations that were involved.
Who should know better, really?
Well, I don't think anybody can know better in the world of mining, where you have to gamble, and mining has always been a gamble and still is.
What will the future hold for Kitsault? Have they given up?
I don't think they've given up, and I think they're taking a look at going into it bigger and more efficiently in order to operate at a profit.
Well, one final word to put to you would be the word chance. What do you think about chance in mining?
Well, chance and mining go hand in hand, and as I said before, we've got to give the people who are willing to invest in mining an opportunity to get a return on that investment, and a good one, or they're not going to, and we're not going to see the jobs created.
So you've got to take a chance.
You have to.
What year did you first come in here?
I came here in 1929.
Gunn, what about you?
27.
You're how old today?
How old today? 54. 74.
You're 74 today.
74.
Inge, how old are you?
67.
Now, it's changed tremendously in Alice Arm.
Yes.
What was it like 50 years ago?
It was just wonderful here. We had about 300-400 people here, and a lot of prospecting and stuff going on there. A lot of old-timers had gardens and what have you, and really nice.
You discovered the Kitsault property.
Yeah. He made that deal, right?
Yes. And you made the deal for it.
Oh, yeah, the molybdenum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So really, you struck it rich.
Yeah, he did. We started something here anyway. Yeah.
Well,
Satisfied.
Things were booming about 5 years ago. Hmm?
Oh, yeah. They were operating that for 5 years, but they took about 5 years before they got it going.
Well, you figured the boom was going to continue, so you built your hotel.
Yeah.
How many rooms?
Oh, dozen room, double room.
What did you figure was going to happen? That this would be a very busy place again?
Oh, it's gonna come back. You know how mining is. Mining is up and down. A lot of copper there too, and now copper is low again now. It isn't so very good demand for copper, but it's gonna come up again. Copper is up and down all the time.
But Gunn, your hotel is for sale. You've got it up for
Yeah,
sale.
Yeah.
How much do you want for it?
How much you give me?
Years ago, you would leave Alice Arm to go to Vancouver. How did you travel?
Well, either Union steamship or Northland navigation, yeah.
And today, how do you travel?
Well, you have to fly now.
Surely that's expensive for a pensioner.
Yes, it's too much. I can't afford it anymore, so don't get out very often.
Well, what do you think about the transportation on the coast?
We got no transportation at all there now.
No, there's no transportation here now.
None at all.
Ripto has given it up. After that, we had Northland here, and they said they could run the route up here without the subsidy. And now they're backing out. They even got a raise of 20% in their rate, and now they're backing out. They just quit us, left us.
What does it actually mean to you to be isolated?
Not very good. It doesn't feel very good at all. And this old timer feel bad about it. We should be looked after. There's been transportation in here 1912 when Union steamship used to come in here. And that's good many years ago. Now they don't give a darn about us.
Standing on a hilltop overlooking Stewart in the summer of 1977, everything truly does look rosy, but you've got problems in your community.
We do. We have, at the present time, a very major problem, Bob, in that for the first time in 70 years, British Columbia's most northerly port, and in fact Canada's most northerly ice-free port, is without a water transport service whatsoever.
But you've always had something plying the coast that took you in and out of here.
Yes, we certainly did, and we needed and depended on it, and we still do to a very large degree due to the very tough winters that we get. We cannot depend on aircraft or overland traffic. We absolutely need water transport. Today we don't have it. We're very concerned about it, and we're hoping that we're going to get some sympathy from the senior governments in the very near future so that we won't be left high and dry.
The problems of communication, and that's a real problem.
That also is a problem, and we don't mind doing things on our own to a degree. We've got our own television system into Stewart. We own and operate it, but technically, and because of the elements, we're up against a tremendous problem. We go for months at a time in the winter without television, without something that people in the larger part of Canada look upon as a normal part of their life.
Look to the future in closing. Do you people feel that you have a future here?
Well, I certainly do. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't an optimist. We'll be more prosperous not only in this area, but throughout the nation because of the mineral riches in this general area.
Thank you, Ian. tree and ice-clad mountains along the Portland Canal in British Columbia against the Alaska Panhandle have provided the riches that men dream of. Since the turn of the century, countless numbers have clawed the wealth from these mountains, living in Stewart, British Columbia with their wives and children. From 1926 to 1936, Lance Potterton was their only policeman, a faithful servant. This is his story. How many rooms were in the Empress Hotel?
I would say about 50. And down below was one great big dance hall. And along one